GBA's collaboration with global organization, and this includes a dialogue with the audience to answer questions and hear your input on the future of the industry and GBA. With that, Gerard.
Hey, guys, why don't you come up and we'll sit on the steps?
We waited all day to get these front rows.
I thought you were doing the mosh pit.
No, don't focus on my job.
All right. Well, so we got Dino, we got everybody. Okay, great. I'm gonna repeat some of the stuff that I said in an earlier panel because I want to give you guys a little bit of a background and context. So I'm Gerard Dache, the Executive Director of the Government Blockchain Association. We started GBA. So I had been running another business, and to make a long story short, I had identified some corruption. I couldn't be a part of it. Some of you guys know the story. But so when I couldn't be a part of that, then essentially that ended that career. So we started GBA basically on a phone. I knew that blockchain was going to be something big, so we started a little meetup. We had a couple of people showing up at a little bar in Washington, D.C. At this point, it had grown to about 40 people. And I had a phone call that basically ended my other career from 2005 to 2017. And at that point, I said, well, I got to turn this meetup into something. So we worked 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. Monday through Saturday for several years to get GBA up off the ground. We didn't know any of the people. We didn't have any relationships. It just took a while. But as we started getting members, they came to us and they said, listen, look, since I didn't know anything about the technology, the people, the relationships, I didn't know what to do. I thought, if we could just get people together, right, we could bring smart people together, they could figure it out, right? I wasn't smart enough to figure it out, but I knew there were a lot of people that were. So I thought if I could get especially people in government with budgets and requirements and get them connected with people that had solutions, right, somewhere along the way we'd figure out how to make money. And to tell you the truth, we didn't really know what we were doing. So we built this chapter model, and we built in fact, I met with Brian early on. He was just launching his podcast, and he asked me to come up to New Jersey to be on it. And I had put a map in 300 cities around the world that had the highest number of government contractors. And I said, Brian, we're in the process of launching chapters in 300 cities, right? Now what I did.
You said you had already launched them in 2 months, and we're going to.
Yeah. Well, the first step in launching them was putting a pin on the map, right? And he bought it hook, line, and sinker. And he's been an advocate of ours, and it was the first chairman of our board. It took me a year or two to get a chairman of the board because trust was so important, and he had earned that trust in spades. So we launched it, and then we built these. We literally did build these chapters all over the world. So we started in Washington, D.C., and I said, look, nobody really knows anything. So I just Googled some stuff about blockchain, and every month we did a different topic. One month we did supply chain, next month identity, whatever. And then we started doing chapters in different cities. You know, somebody said, hey, listen, I like because a lot of people travel to Washington, they would go to these meetups, and they said, I really like what you're doing here. Can I do the same thing in New York, in Miami, in Denver? So we said, sure. So I'll send you my slides. And then that started to grow all over the world. We actually did launch, I think, ultimately about 120 chapters in terms of actually had people around the world that were doing these meetups. And so I was sending these PowerPoints to these people all over the world, right? And they were then translated into their own languages, making it appropriate for their culture. But I got to the point where I just couldn't do it, right? There are just too many subjects and topics. So we started creating these working groups, right? And so that's where we now have about 50 working groups. They all came from, I needed folks to help me build this content to feed the chapters. And then there was this thing that happened. You probably heard about it. It was in the news a lot, called COVID. And all of our chapters died, right? Nobody was meeting in person. So then I looked over these working groups and I said, well, we got to make these working groups work. And along that time, somebody said to me, look, we're having a hard time selling the government. And I said, because you don't have a box to check. We need to come up with some way to check the box. And that's where the BMM started to come from. How can we help these companies essentially get credibility so they can sell to government? And the other question we kept asking along the way is, how do we make money, we were making no money. I mean, these meetups were great, lots of people, but there's no cash flow. And then along the way, we said we really need to focus on helping our members get money, either through grants, project funding, contracts, whatever. So as we look into 2025, right, you know, these events are great. I'm not, but we can't do the events and build a BMM at the same time. It's just, in terms of the limited resources we have, we just can't do both well. So this year we did 3 conferences. They were great. I think next year we got to focus on the BMM and getting projects funded for BMM. So every GBA BMM member, right, the organizational members, and what we want to help them do is get contracts, grant funding, and individual members, we want to help them get jobs. And we just want to help, as a business league, we want to help our members make money. And for our public sector folks, we want to help them meet mission by having access to high quality products, services, and people. So that's what we're going to do in 2025. I got some distinguished guests here to talk about some different aspects of that. So I'm going to go over here and we'll talk about how we're going to get that done. So real quickly, because I'm running a little over, Davis, I want to start with you. Tell me a little bit about who you are. And the question I would like you to answer is, why is it important for us to deal with some of these perspectives, these perceptions about blockchain? You know, the problems that these companies are trying to overcome when they go talk to government, right? Talk to them a little bit about overcoming that perspective thing.
Great. Testing. Is that good? Thank you so much, Gerard. My name is Davis Richardson. I'm the founder and president of Paradox Public Relations. We're a global communications firm advising companies at the intersection of emerging technology and public policy. And we've worked with companies in blockchain, which include Filecoin, Foundation, Decentraland, Protocol Labs, Crystal Intelligence, and Elementis, which is partnered with Palantir on forensics work. To answer your question, Gerard, I think one of the issues with a lot of trade organizations is that a lot of the insights that community members or different companies come up with can oftentimes stay within that organization. What we're looking to do is really communicate a lot of the insight and analysis and regulatory reform that a lot of GBA members are putting together in these working groups. And when we were wading into blockchain, actually our journey didn't begin with Bitcoin. It actually began with digital identity and the World Bank's ID for D program and how blockchain could solve some of these global challenges that we're all facing. When we look to get more into this space, the issue is ripe with bad actors, and it does have a serious reputation problem. And organizations like the GBA are so important because they're creating a best practices standard which other companies can follow to work with government and turn this into a healthy ecosystem. But the communication aspect is really important to that, and making sure that organizations like the GBA and the important work that all of you are doing in these working groups is really told to the broader public, whether that's a trade outlet like CoinDesk or whether that's mainstream press. We've gotten clients covers in Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and it's, for us, really an honor to be on this journey with you, and thank you so much for putting this together.
Thank you. And you guys have a table, you got some brochures out there. So if you're in the blockchain space and you're really trying to get information out there about who you are, what you're doing, touch base with these guys, because they do a lot of great stuff. They're helping GBA in some of our promotion as well. But it's absolutely critical that we get the right messages out, not only to our potential customers, but to the industry. So Dino, let me go to you. So you were involved with the GBA, right? Talk to them a little bit about why you got involved and where are we going in terms of, from your role, right? Where do you see the GBA and the relationship with the UN and the global adoption of BMM?
So I alluded to yesterday, the reason why I got involved with the GBA was in parallel with the deployment of the solution that we designed and implemented the UN Pension Fund. I started to be really concerned about my ability to support and justify the use of emerging technologies in front of my governing bodies. As I provided some example, my situation is relatively complicated because when you are facing with representatives of 193 countries, it's hard to pinpoint and to say, well, we use NIST, or we use the British Standard Institute, or we use something else. So I always been, in my former capacity of auditor, at international standard. And when I inquired with the ISO standardization organization, I realized that the level of maturity in that field was relatively low. So I started to search for association, for groups of like-minded people that shared my concern on how to demonstrate that the use, adoption of emerging technologies, specifically blockchain, but also biometrics, artificial intelligence, is really done in a trustworthy manner, in a credible manner, in a secure manner, in a responsible and ethical manner. And that's when I came across the GBA. I started to interact with Gerard and the group at large. I started to get involved in the development of the BMM, the blockchain maturity model. And basically, I became a regular, I can say, of our weekly meetings and periodic meetings. So at the same time, that was the period when I joined this initiative called the Internet Governance Forum, which is a forum that the United Nations created in 2005 as a deliverable, as an outcome of the first conference on the World Society of Information Technology. And so since 2005, the aim, the goal of this forum is represented by a key term, which is multi-stakeholderism. So the UN basically was given the mandate to create a forum, to create a platform where in an open manner, the representative of all different sectors and areas of a society will be represented in discussing, in debating, in proposing, in recommending best practices for the use of internet and associated technologies. One component of this forum are represented by the dynamic coalition, basically a different term to call working groups. As of today, there are 32 working groups, and there are thematic working groups. So there is the dynamic coalition on internet security, the dynamic coalition on safety of the children online, the dynamic coalition on privacy, and so forth and so on. So I started to be very excited about the potentials of discussing the use, the responsible, ethical use of blockchain in this forum, because there was no such a thing at that time. So I thought, and I approached Gerard and I said, would you like to sponsor with me the creation of a dedicated dynamic coalition on blockchain assurance and standardization? So Gerard was happy to join me in this adventure. We submitted a proposal. The proposal was accepted. And so we started. Last year was our first event we participated. So this forum, the IGF, takes place every year in a different country. Last year we were in Kyoto, Japan. This year we are going to be in Riyadh, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So every year it changes. And the event takes place during a week-long period. It's a very intense. There is a long list of sessions that are taking place during this week. Usually the first day is extremely formal. The Prime Minister or the President of the hosting country opens the session. And then we break out into different workshop, session, lightning talks, conferences, open forum. There are different terms to identify the approach that is utilized. So as a dynamic coalition, we are given a session, usually either 60 minutes or 90 minutes, where we invite speakers from our community to come and present their experience in adopting and using blockchain. And my specific push is always been, let's start with practical example. Even if we're not in production yet, but let's share with the international community practical implementation of blockchain in a way that we can show a bottom-up approach. Because in the environment of the international conferences, we have a lot of a high-level General Assembly resolution, recommendation, best practices. But what oftentimes it's lacking, or let's say there are limited examples, are at the actual implementation of these high-level statements and principles and values and guidelines. So I think the benefit that of this participation and this joint effort is that through the GBA, we have been able, through the result and the deliverable, the different working groups that the GBA has, we have been sharing, starting last year and now hopefully also this year, concrete example of how the GBA community has been able to use the technology and make it at the service of the international community of those who participate in this event to provide best practices.
Thank you, Dino. And one of the aspects of that IGF group that we're participating in is we're sharing the BMM with the global community. And as companies go through the assessment, we're going to be sharing those assessment results with the global community. So the idea is, let's work with GBA members, let's help them get their solutions up to the point where they can earn a BMM credential. Once they do, we'll publish it on the GBA site. We'll also publish it on our UN Dynamic Coalition. And then this is sort of one of the reasons why we're doing this relation with the UN. Then we can then promote our GBA members or anybody who's passed the BMM assessment. If you pass the BMM assessment, you automatically get membership into the GBA. And then let's use this forum that we have been gifted, really. I mean, we're doing some work to earn it, but the reality is that Dino's made this available to us. And then let's use that forum to help promote GBA members globally, because all of these solutions, typically the money can come from anywhere in the world, right, to your solution. So if you're located in Argentina, right, or Washington, D.C., and you have a blockchain solution, you can get money from all over the world to come into your area. And this is part of economic development, right? Or if you're in Baltimore City, right? The other aspect of this we're not really covering now, we had an entire panel that is project funding. So we've also built an entire mechanism for people who are looking for funding to be able to go get the funding, help them build their tech, help them build their maturity, get to a BMM rating. And so it all focuses on how we help our members become more successful, right? That's kind of what we're all about. Steve, walk us through, in the time we have left, if somebody's interested in going through the process, right, whether they want to become an assessor, whether they want to get their solution assessed, walk them through a little bit of that process of what that's all about.
Thank you, Gerard. So first, let's talk about solutions. So Gerard said solutions, and the other is becoming a BMM professional, which is a little bit different. But let's focus on a solution. So you're a GBA member, and you have a blockchain-based solution. So you may have talked to Gerard or myself or someone, you have some general understanding, and you say, hey, Gerard, I want to do the BMM. Well, that's great, but the best way to kind of kick it off is to go to the GBA website. On the home page is you fill out an inquiry form. So it's just first name, last name, and there's a few other fields to fill out, and that comes to me and two others. But I get that, and I can reach out to you with your email or phone number, and we can have that initial conversation about BMM if you haven't had it already. And the important part of this initial conversation is to kind of get an understanding of your solution's readiness for an assessment. what I have found in speaking with several solutions is, they've received some money, they've started building, and they're in production, and they're doing great things, but they've sort of overlooked some of the basics, which is the documentation, the founding pieces that identify who they are. And it's this documentation material which the assessors need to learn about the solution, to educate themselves. So this aspect of assessment readiness is important. So we have that sort of general conversation. And then there's, if we move on from there, there's some administrative paperwork that I have to work with. So my role within a GBA is the director of the BMM program. So, I'm sort of that liaison, that facilitator. So that the administrative paperwork is the assessment request form, what's your name of your solution, where's it registered, who's leading the organization, who's your solution point of contact, anything around the solution as far as any particular scope that you're looking for, sort of the parameters of the assessment, want to kind of get that understanding. And from that, I'll use that information to fill out an assessment agreement, which lays out all the aspects of the solution, or of the assessment for the solution. So we're moving along in this process. And then my role as the director of the BMM, I lead, so each Friday is a BMM professionals working group meeting where everyone who is a BMM professional, we get together and we talk about, we call it the BMM pipeline, the solutions that are interested in getting an assessment and where they're at sort of in the queue. And my role is to identify or work with the group to identify a lead assessor for a solution. And that lead assessor will work with the solution point of contact to start to gather this documentation and to identify any gaps. And so this is that assessment readiness. So we're sort of moving along, and then ideally we'd like the solution to take the BMM training, which is the virtual in-person training. And with that, you'll be accustomed. So it's 2 days. We mentioned a couple times here. So in November, it is Saturday, November 16th, and then Sunday, November 17th. It's 12 to 5. Gerard and I typically teach it. And it's this immersion into the BMM. And with that understanding, now you're exposed to BMM land, and all of the terminology and the concepts. It becomes less foreign, and then you can start to do the self-assessment, and that's where we can start to identify the gaps.
Yeah, let me pause you for a second. Let's take them that far, right? Because once they get there, there's a whole bunch of other steps, and with the time we have remaining on the clock, I want to shift over to one last component. But that's the process, right? You go to the GBA. Well, you could also send an email to bmm@gbaglobal.org. That'll also go to Steve and a number of others. But if you have any interest, there's a whole process for getting you started, right? But Davis, I want to go back to you. Once somebody's gone through the assessment, right, and we're going to publish them on the GBA site and stuff like that, what are some things that you might be able to do to help them get the word out about their accomplishments and the fact that differentiating themselves from all the hype that's out there?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that this is an industry that's being written in real time. We were working with a client last year this is 2023 in January, there was some, rumblings of the term deep end, but this really didn't exist widely even within like mainstream parts of the industry. And now we have a whole conference named after it, like the speed and the acceleration of which this industry is moving it's very significant right now. And I would advise any company to just stay in touch with reporters. It's being written in real time, and if you're working with credible organizations like the GBA, which do want, best practices standard, it's important that reporters have those sources, because otherwise you get someone like an FTX coming in where, they're staying close to media and they're a first mover in the space, but, the substance is lacking because they haven't gone through the rigor of creating a company and a product which actually does meet government standards. So on the media side, what we're happy to offer for, companies is, as you're doing this work, as you're doing this research, we want to hear about it. If there's, a new term that's bumbling up, which, could potentially alter the direction of this industry, let's start shopping that to reporters. I think it's really time that a lot of companies and individuals in this space own the narratives which they're building and be a stakeholder, not just in, the technology, but also the language and the media narratives that are popping up around this.
In conclusion, we only have about 20 seconds left. I want to share one funny story about Dino, right? So everybody holds him in extremely high regards, as do I, but every once in a while I do get to say a funny story, and I like to watch him blush, right? The only time that I've seen Dino really surprised is when we finally published the BMM. Do you remember that? Because I don't know if any of us ever believed that it could be done. So, but thanks to his great support and leadership and a number of others, it's been a successful and really rewarding journey. So I'd like to thank you, all the members of our panel. Davis, please reach out to Davis, because we, like you said, we do need to own the narrative. And please reach out to Steve, because we want to help you guys get through this process. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.